The Beef Cattle Institute at Kansas State University has created a pregnancy analytics app that will allow easy chute-side data collection at the time of pregnancy diagnosis of beef cattle herds, and will immediately turn PregCheck data into easy-to-read charts and tables that provide enhanced information for veterinarians providing in-depth interpretation of the recently completed breeding season. If you have already downloaded the app, click the icon on your device and you will be taken to the login screen. If you already have an account, select Login. If you need to create an account, I recommend that you close this video and go to the Getting Started video that will provide instructions about registering for an account, setting up herd information, and entering PregCheck data. Once you have created one or more data sets, you can view a report of the PregCheck data. Start by selecting the data set you want to view. The Pregnancy Analytics app allows veterinarians and producers to evaluate the breeding season in a much more in-depth way than simply identifying which cows are open and which cows are pregnant. The app will generate charts that clearly show what percentage of the herd became pregnant in each 21-day period of the breeding season. As we begin to think about interpreting pregnancy patterns, it is important to define a successful breeding season. In order to be economically sustainable, beef cattle producers must have cow herds that can have a high percentage of the cows becoming pregnant in a controlled breeding season. In addition, a high percentage of the cows need to become pregnant early in the first 21 days of the breeding season. In order to have a high percentage of the cows becoming pregnant in the first 21 days of breeding, nearly all of the cows must have resumed fertile cycles after calving, and the bulls must be fertile and able to successfully mate cows in the herd. An important limitation to the number of cows that can become pregnant each 21-day cycle is that there is only a 60 to 70% likelihood of a cow becoming pregnant and maintaining the pregnancy through early gestation each time she ovulates a fertile egg and is mated by one or more fertile bulls. This limitation is due to the complexity of biology and reproduction and probably cannot be improved. Most instances, when a cow ovulates a fertile egg and is mated, but either fails to become pregnant or fails to maintain the pregnancy, results in the cow continuing fertile estrus cycles and expressing a fertile heat again about 21 days after the last estrus, giving her another 60 to 70% likelihood of becoming pregnant. Once all the cows have been examined and their pregnancy status determined, the veterinarian and producer can begin to evaluate the success of the preceding breeding season. The simplest number to evaluate after determining the pregnancy status of a cow herd is the percent of cows that are pregnant. If this number is low, the veterinarian and producer can agree that the herd experienced reproductive failure, but this number does not help to diagnose the cause of the failure. Finding out when cows become pregnant during the breeding season provides much more information than just whether or not the cow is pregnant or open. Because a cow's reproductive cycle lasts about 21 days, a good way to assess a herd's reproductive performance is to determine the number of cows that become pregnant each 21-day period of the breeding season. By evaluating the pregnancy status pattern by 21-day intervals, evidence for when cows were becoming pregnant and failing to become pregnant can help differentiate between the many reasons that cows could be open at the end of PregCheck. Because of the limitations associated with cattle reproduction, the best pregnancy pattern that can be reasonably expected is one where 60 to 65% of the herd becomes pregnant during the first 21 days of breeding. This level of reproductive success would provide evidence that at the start of the breeding season, nearly all of the cows had resumed fertile cycles and the bulls were fertile and successfully mating. If the non-pregnant cows continue to have fertile cycles and the bulls continue to successfully mate cows in heat, then 65% of the cows that failed to establish or maintain a pregnancy from the first cycle would become pregnant during the second 21 days of breeding. This would be about 23% of the herd. As the breeding season moves into the third 21 days, if the non-pregnant cows continue to have fertile cycles and the bulls continued to successfully mate cows in heat, then 65% of the cows that failed to establish or maintain a pregnancy from the first two cycles should become pregnant during the third 21 days of breeding. This would be about 7% of the herd. Therefore, after 3 cycles, or 60 to 65 days, the highest reproductive success that can be reasonably expected is for approximately 95% of the cows to be pregnant, with nearly 2/3 becoming pregnant in the first 21 days. Let's look at the pregnancy data from an example herd collected with the Pregnancy Analytics app. We notice that the percent of open, 7%, is not alarming, but the percent pregnant in the first 21 days of breeding is 52%, which is below the goal of 60 to 65%. Because we expect fertile, cycling cows exposed to fertile bulls to have greater reproductive success during a 21-day cycle, we have evidence that either far fewer than 100% of the cows had resumed fertile cycles, or the bulls were not successfully impregnating the cows in the herd. Another way to evaluate data collected at PregCheck is to determine the percentage of cows available to be bred, that is, those cows that are not already pregnant, that become pregnant each 21-day period. To display this calculation on the Pregnancy Analytics app, select Percent Preg Success. This will present this percentage in a table. The goal for each 21-day period is that 60 to 70% of available cows would become pregnant, indicating that both the cows and the bulls are fertile. If the herd does not meet those goals, the pattern of those percentages from one 21-day period to the next provides important diagnostic information. In this herd, the percentage of available cows that becomes pregnant the first 21 days is lower than desired, but then improves the second 21 days and meets the goal of 60 to 70%, resulting in 31.5% of the herd becoming pregnant in the second 21 days of the breeding season. Therefore, we know that by the second 21 days of breeding, both the cows and bulls are fertile, and either the cows or bulls were less fertile at the start of breeding. Because cows require several weeks to resume fertile cycles after calving, cows that calve late in the calving season or that have a prolonged period of infertility after calving may not be cycling during the first 21 days of the breeding season, but then resume fertile cycles during the second or later 21-day periods. Bulls can also be less fertile at the start of the breeding season and then experience improved fertility as the breeding season progresses. This may occur with young bulls that become more fertile with age or that gain mating experience. Mature bulls that are recovering from disease or injury may experience improved fertility over time as well. Thorough breeding soundness examinations of bulls before the start of the breeding season is an important evaluation to avoid bull infertility issues. In the third 21 days of the breeding season, 56.5% of available cows became pregnant, resulting in 9.5% of the herd becoming pregnant during this period. Although the percentage of available cows becoming pregnant is below our target of 60 to 65%, the breeding success did not drop or rise appreciably. And late in the breeding season, the number of cows available to breeding should be relatively low, making interpretation of percentages of small numbers difficult and untrustworthy. Hopefully, you will agree that when evaluating PregCheck data by 21-day intervals to provide information about when in the breeding season the cows are becoming pregnant, provides much more information than simply determining the percent of cows that become pregnant. But data collected at PregCheck can provide even more information if we determine who is becoming pregnant each 21-day period. Because we know that different groups of cows within a herd can have different reproductive success, the next level of pregnancy information analysis involves looking at when important groups become pregnant during each 21 days of the breeding season. Some important groups to evaluate are divided by body condition, age, or some other descriptors such as breed or source. Let's look at some pregnancy patterns by some of these important groupings. First, let's look at patterns divided by body condition categories. We can also divide the herd into age categories, or breed, or other descriptive categories. Remember that our example herd had good overall reproductive success, only 7% open after a controlled breeding season, but when we evaluated the herd by 21-day intervals, we identified that any reduction in reproductive success primarily occurred during the first 21 days of the breeding season. If we didn't collect any descriptors of the cows, there would not be much more to learn from the PregCheck data. However, if we can further divide the cows into subgroupings based on factors known to impact reproductive success, the PregCheck data can reveal even more information about the herd's reproductive performance. Let's start our further investigation by evaluating the reproductive performance of cows classified as being either thin, moderate, or fleshy in body condition. Most of the cows in this herd are in the moderate category for body condition, a 5 or 6 on a 9-point scale. Both the thin and fleshy category cows did not perform as well reproductively as the moderate cows, but this herd had very few cows in either of those categories. When we look at the table that displays the percent of available cows that become pregnant during each 21-day period, we see that cows in all three body condition score categories perform better in the second 21 days of the breeding season compared to the first 21 days, indicating that body condition could possibly be associated with less than optimal reproductive performance. But be cautious that you don't overinterpret the numbers. Remember that in this herd, very few cows were classified as thin, and the body condition was assessed at the time of pregnancy diagnosis more than 3 months since the start of the breeding season. Therefore, let's continue our evaluation of the data before we finalize our conclusions. When we evaluate the herd by age category, we see a very large difference in reproductive performance. The mature cows perform very well, while very few of the first calf heifers become pregnant in the first 21 days of breeding. Because the first calf heifers and cows were in the same breeding pastures, it is apparent that the reproductive problems were not associated with the bulls, since they were very successful breeding cows. What happened during the breeding season is particularly clear when we look at when the cows became pregnant by 21-day period and by age category. We can see that cows performed fairly well throughout the breeding season, but the first calf heifers performed very poorly during the first 21 days and then had good reproductive success later in the breeding season. For this evaluation, based on herd history and pregnancy pattern analysis, I am convinced that the bulls were fertile during the entire breeding season, the cows performed well, but that the heifers had a prolonged period after calving when they were not fertile. The veterinarian and producer will probably want to consider interventions such as breeding the heifers to calve ahead of the cows, to give more days between calving and the start of breeding, or to feed heifers separately from cows during late pregnancy and early lactation to try to decrease the number of days after calving required to resume fertile cycles. Now let's look at a different herd. This herd has a very high percent open, about 20%, and few cows became pregnant in the first 21 days. When we include an assessment of the percentage of available cows that become pregnant each period, we confirm that very few cows became pregnant during the first 21 days of breeding, but the herd had steady but slow improvement over the next two 21-day periods. By evaluating age subgroups, we find that neither the cows nor the first calf heifers performed well, and there doesn't appear to be an important difference between age categories. Evaluating the table that depicts the percent of available cows that became pregnant each period, we confirm that the herd had improved reproductive performance as the herd progressed in time from the first to the second 21-day periods, but never reached the goal of 60 to 70% of available cows becoming pregnant in any of the 21-day periods. These depictions provide no evidence that age category is a primary influence affecting reproductive success. However, when we look at the herd data divided by body condition, we find evidence that cows classified as thin did not perform as well as cows classified as moderate. Lack of cows classified as fleshy is very concerning. I think it is important to note that no cows in the thin category became pregnant in the first 21 days. Looking at both the pregnancy pattern and the table that depicts the percent of available cows that became pregnant each period, we see that cows in all three body condition score categories perform better in the second 21 days of the breeding season compared to the first 21 days. Fertility is improving as the breeding season progresses for both the thin and moderate conditioned cows, but doesn't approach expected levels until the third 21 days of the breeding season. Low body condition, as evidenced by too many thin cows and too few fleshy cows, appears to be the most important factor affecting herd reproductive performance. Poor fertility across all body conditions categories would indicate that bull fertility could be a primary or contributing factor affecting this herd's reproductive performance. But because the moderate conditioned cows perform much better than thin conditioned cows, I lean towards the cows having a prolonged period of postpartum infertility rather than a bull problem as the cause of the poor reproductive performance of this herd. Grazing and nutritional management need to be addressed in this herd. To store the information gathered and interpreted at the time of herd preg check, the charts can be emailed automatically to the email address you entered when you registered, and to anyone else you want to send them to. You can also send the raw data to yourself as a spreadsheet file. Once you have the spreadsheet, you can use pivot tables or other spreadsheet tools to further evaluate the data. Pregnancy distributions created from preg check data are one of several important pieces of information used by veterinarians evaluating beef herd reproduction. Although pregnancy distributions may not always provide definitive answers in herd fertility investigations, they are a powerful diagnostic tool to assist veterinarians and producers improve reproductive efficiency of beef herds. If you have any questions, please contact the Beef Cattle Institute by emailing us at bci@ksu.edu.